I'm going to kick the camera just a few degrees this way. That way I can see this and be better on camera. Yeah, perfect. That's good.
Oh, hello, welcome. So glad to have each and every one of you here for one of our Constitution Day events. And this is the History and Politics Club Dunwoody sponsoring this event at 1 o'clock on the Dunwoody campus. We are so fortunate and happy to have Dunwoody City Councilman Jim Riticher here with us to talk to us about separation of powers. He's going to give a brief background or a brief discussion on his background and then get into his talk. So let's give him a warm welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi. So I'm calling this separation of powers an alternate look, and it's alternate because I'm certainly not a history professor. I'm not a Constitution scholar or a lawyer. I'm just a regular guy involved in local government, in the nitty gritty of, how this really works down at the local level. So if you can hit me a slide. So who is this guy? Why has Dr. Turner inflicted me on you? I'm Jim Riticher. Again, I'm a Dunwoody City Council member. I'm 35 plus year Dunwoody resident, retired engineer and tech consultant. I got a couple of Georgia Tech mechanical engineering degrees. I'm a husband and a dad. I'm a social media dinosaur. If you're wondering who this guy is and you're trying to look for my Facebook account, there isn't one. I actually go out and talk to people on their front porches and get their votes. That works in local government still. And I was successful at it 8 years ago and 4 years ago. I've got an election coming up November 2nd on election day. This is just a screen grab from the city website. That's me, the mayor, and my council counterparts at the City of Dunwoody in front of City Hall over on Ashford Dunwoody. You may have driven by there and know the building, but that's right out front. So why separation of powers? Why is that such an important part of the Constitution? Well, the short answer is it's an answer to government tyranny. Why did we create this nation? We did it because we didn't like the tyranny of a king. We didn't like being told what to do by some guy in London. Here we were an ocean away on a big continent, and we had some guy in a powdered wig in London telling us how we had to live our lives. Tyrannical governments, typically governments run by kings, emperors, pharaohs, chiefs, grand poobahs, call them what you will. But some key aspects are that the leader's word is law. He lays down the law, often under the imprimatur of God made me leader. Question this, bad things might happen to you. Again, in the English experience, you question the king, you might end up in the Tower of London. If you were lucky, you might just mold away for a while and maybe they'd cut you loose. If you were unlucky, they'd kill you and throw you in the Thames. If you were really unlucky, they'd torture you, kill you, and throw you in the Thames. And, you can look this sort of thing up. It, went on not all that many hundreds of years ago. Might made right. And typically these governments were hereditary because my kids are better than you and your kids. That was the operating principle for most of these tyrannical governments of the sort that we rejected in coming up with our form of government. Go ahead. So there are many problems with tyrannical governments. They're inefficient. One man can't know it all, can't run it all, and he's probably not the best guy to pick out who should be running all the subparts of government. There's no human rights. There's no freedom of religion. There's no freedom of speech. All the rights recognized in our Bill of Rights. If the king decides he doesn't want to be Catholic anymore, he's going to be a Protestant. He tells all the people, hey, you're Protestants down. If you don't like it, tough. This sort of thing happened over and over again in European history. There's a lot of resentment at not being heard. You know the phrase taxation without representation. Who likes being taxed when you have no say-so in what your money is being spent on? How that's, there's many more issues, but that's some of the bigger ones. So the question is, how do you fix those problems? How do you fix the problem of a tyrannical government? Well, in the American experience, you have a revolution. you overthrow that tyrannical government. So in 1776, after a whole bunch of lead up events, the party really started on April 19th, 1776 at Lexington and Concord Bridge. The British said, yeah, we don't like you upstart colonialists having your own weapons, having your own militia, and we're going to come take your privately owned muskets and cannons away from you. Well, the colonists objected to this. They formed up and they fought the British at Lexington and Concord Bridge and sent them running back to Boston. And it was on. And so for a number of years until I should know the end, 1783, 84, for that 7-8 year period, we fought a revolution against the British to get rid of the king and form our own sovereign government. We overthrew the tyranny of the king. Okay. So we form a new government, but the initial one was a little bit janky. Without getting too deep into it, the Articles of Confederation, which was our first form of government post-revolution, was almost too far in the other direction. It was bordering on anarchism. There was not enough power in the government to do the things that a national government needed to do to operate in the world of that era. So ultimately, the Articles of Confederation were set aside, and the Constitution, as we operate under today, was born. Go ahead. So what was the key goal? For me, the key goal was to limit the power of government. We didn't like those tyrannies. So we had leaders who were elected for short periods. It wasn't divine right of kings, it's mine for life, and then my kids get it. We had leaders who were elected for short periods, requiring the people's approval. We had enumerated powers. Government didn't have power over everything. There were just defined things that the federal government was to take control of and operate under. There was separation of powers. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but you don't want too much power in one man. We had come from systems where there was a king, an emperor, there was a huge amount of power in one person. And the whole point of separation of powers is to not have too much power in one man's hand, because that's proven over and over again in history to be extraordinarily dangerous. And then also we have a federal system. We'll talk about that more in a minute. That's really kind of the basis of the talk, because really that's another separation of powers. Go ahead. So the traditional separation of powers that y'all have hopefully heard multiple times in grade school and civics and US government and history classes is you've got the executive, the president, who carries out the laws, takes on federal responsibilities, negotiates with foreign countries, leads the military if war is necessary. You've got a legislative branch who make the laws that the president carries out, and you've got a judicial branch that sorts out disagreements about the law. And just to kind of bring this home, this is all kind of nebulous for most, but judicial branch, lesser federal courts, you've got the Supreme Court, and then one down from that are the circuit courts of appeals. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals is in downtown Atlanta. And it just so happens that my wife is good friends with a woman who has become a federal judge at the 11th Circuit. So it's, these are not, nebulous creatures. They are real flesh and blood human beings that you can interact with, and, don't think they're unapproachable. That's kind of part of the American system is, nobody in an elected position should feel like they're high and mighty above the citizenry, because that's, we repudiated that with the revolution. No one was above another man. Next slide. So there's a further separation of powers besides these three branches at the federal level, in that we have federal, state, and local governments. So state governments generally we have state governments that generally mirror the federal government, but not exactly. There's a state or two out there that have unicameral legislatures. Our Congress and our state legislature have a bicameral House with a Senate and a House of Representatives. But there are a couple of states out there that have a unicameral legislature. So it's not an exact mirror, but lots of similarities. And then you've got local governments at the county and or city level, which is where I come in. And a key concept, a key word that if you haven't heard it before, I'm going to hammer it today, is subsidiarity. What does that mean? That means that's the concept that government decisions should be made at the lowest level reasonable for the issue at hand. We don't want some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. deciding where we put sidewalks and how wide they ought to be and where our next park should go and whether it should have a baseball diamond or a rectangular field. That's not something anybody far away should decide. We should be deciding that local. That's subsidiarity. Go ahead. So there's even more separation of powers at the local level in that you've got county, city, and school governments. So one thing, and this is not every state operates like this, but here in Georgia, school systems are their own sovereign government. I have nothing to say about DeKalb County school system. The DeKalb County school system, or I'm sorry, the DeKalb County Commission, the county commission has nothing to say about the DeKalb County School District. They have their own elected officials, their own, the school board. They have their own taxation authority, which is a key point. And they, under our state constitution, they have the power to do everything regarding the schools. If they listen to me, it's out of courtesy, just because, I'm a local official, so they kind of listen to me a little bit, but they don't have to and often don't listen to local officials, so that's an important, another separation of powers. You don't have, you've got a separation between school and other governmental functions. Also, you've got the some services provided by the county at the county level, some at the city level. And the question of which services are provided by whom are kind of hashed out in something in a document, or really hashed out and then get documented in a document called the Service Delivery Strategy. So the State Department of Community Affairs requires that every municipality and every county have this very well-defined service delivery strategy document, so there isn't overlap, there isn't duplication of functions. So go ahead. We'll talk about that more in a second. Local government, while it somewhat mirrors the federal level, there are differences, and this is the best slide I could find that describes how Dunwoody city government is. Our model of local city government, and there are different models on how local governments work. This is pretty close. This is a pretty good depiction of ours. The voters elect a council and a mayor. But in the council manager form of government, the mayor doesn't have executive power in the way that a president or a governor does, okay? The mayor is really a first among equals on the council. The mayor presides over the council, runs the meetings, and has some appointment powers. He or she appoints the city manager, appoints board and commission members, appoints the city attorney, some things like that, subject to approval by the council. So the mayor's got to get to 4 in our system, and getting to 4 is just getting to a majority on a 7-member council, okay? Then the administrative power in this form of government rides with a professional city manager, and he serves at the pleasure of the mayor and council. If we lose faith in the city manager and get to 4 to say he's out, he's looking for a new job. So, but the key point is that chief administrator, that executive, is not an elected official. Okay, he has a significant amount of executive power, but is not elected. We oversee him, kind of like a board of directors in corporate governance. And then the city manager hires the chief of police, the director of public works, the director of planning and zoning, the director of finance, the director of IT, and then the whole, all the departments, all the folks that work for city government. So that's our model. You could spend a week on local government models. That's ours. Go ahead. So what are the services that we provide as a city at the local level? We provide police, not fire or ambulance, but as you know from out front, Georgia State also has police. DeKalb County Schools also has resource officers, and many or most of those are also sworn officers. So there's sort of some overlap. Our guys work together with those guys because, there's one or two guys on duty, and if they need backup, we're there for them. We provide 911 services. We don't get that from the county. If you call 911, you're calling into an operation called Chatcom, and that's a whole nother long story of, they're really a joint effort among Brookhaven, Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, and Johns Creek that have their own 911 center. We do public works, roads and drainage. I can't tell you how many, in the 25 years before cityhood, which was 11 and a half years ago, call it 12, I guess, darn near nothing got paved out here, and roads were really in terrible shape, especially when you got back in the older subdivisions that were built in the mid-late 60s. Drainage you didn't see, but back in that era, they used a product called CMP, corrugated metal pipe. So what this was galvanized steel buried in the red clay to do your drainage. Well, guess what? That had about a 40-year life. Guess what? We had a lot of red clay at the bottom where those had rusted out. So we've had a huge program to repave roads, redo the drainage system. We do parks. Again, Brook Run has come so far in the last 10 years, it's unbelievable. That amphitheater is brand new, the big pavilion, the small pavilions, the playgrounds, the rectangular fields in the back, the dog park's been fully upgraded. The only thing that's about like it was is the skate park and the community greenhouse is about the only thing that's there that's anything like what it was when we became a city. And then we do planning, zoning, and building code enforcement. So, a fairly typical function of local government is doing planning and zoning. Again, this is not something you want done at the state level. You don't want it done, at the federal level. You want local control over planning and zoning, and that's a large part of the reason we became a city. Really those first, third, and fifth bullet points are really at the heart of why Dunwoody went after cityhood starting about 15 years ago. We weren't getting public works. We weren't getting our roads repaved. We weren't getting good police coverage. There was a precinct on Ashford Dunwoody across from the mall. Those guys would roll out and head elsewhere. There was maybe one cop on duty in Dunwoody at any given time. We just, and we were paying big taxes and, not getting very good police coverage for it. And then planning and zoning. DeKalb County was zoning stuff that we just didn't want and fought, and, we got it rammed down our throats, and we said, no, we don't want this. And, we fought for cityhood and managed to get it through the legislature. And here we are. And I think, as someone who's lived through it and watched it, we are a much better city for it. The improvements have just been incredible. Go ahead. So what are the DeKalb services in Dunwoody? Well, DeKalb County provides the fire system. All your fire stations are DeKalb County function. They provide ambulance, EMS. The sheriff and the jail are a county function, and that never goes to the city level in Georgia. The sheriff and the jail is a county function along with some county level courts. Water and sewer is the county. I don't know if you've ever seen the reservoirs off of Peeler. And then the main entrance is off of Winter's Chapel, close by over here. But that facility provides all the water for DeKalb County. Think about that for a minute. That's like getting close to 1 million population. That one facility is doing it all. Animal control, sanitation, trash pickup. Those services the county does. You know, some of them, like the sheriff and the jail, you know, we can't take over. But some of these other ones, like we could take over sanitation if we wanted to and have a private contractor come in and do it, but we're happy with the county service, so we have them do it. Go ahead. So let's do a couple of case studies on, you know, how does this interplay? What happens with the nitty gritty when, you know, people disagree on things? So we decided that we were going to require steel and concrete construction for large multifamily housing for improved safety. Okay, and we're talking about 200,000 plus, like 4-story and up, you know, very large multifamily construction. We required steel and concrete. Well, the state, after we did that, you know, the next session of the legislature, the Gold Dome got involved and said, no, we're not going to let you do that. We're going to go, you know, we're going to basically nuke what you did and allow timber construction. And there might have been some timber industry lobbying with the rural legislators involved in that, just saying. So that's kind of a you know, a case study of the interplay between these separation of powers levels that I've been talking about. Let's go ahead. Whoops. There was another, I thought I had another slide in there. Is there not another case study? Ah, I could have sworn I had written up another case study. Go down. Is our slide past questions? All right, let me describe another case study in city versus county versus state. So Dunwoody looked at ambulance response times. Ambulance is provided by DeKalb County. We didn't like the ambulance response times. Their contractor was not meeting the terms of his contract. DeKalb County was not acting in a way to force him to adhere to the terms of his contract. So, you know, we got involved. We tried to get the county to do the right thing. They improved a little bit, but it wasn't anywhere near enough. They never came close to the promised numbers that were in the contract that we felt were, you know, a minimum baseline. So we went to a state creation, which is an ambulance board. There's an ambulance zone board that is a state correction that oversees ambulance zones, you know, that DeKalb County held it, you know, so we couldn't, because DeKalb County had the ambulance zone, we could not set up our own ambulance service and say, yeah, it's been nice, but you take your ambulances to the rest of the county. Yeah, I don't have this slide.
Oh.
You know, take your ambulances to the rest of the county, we'll run our own ambulances. Well, we couldn't do that because of the way the state government had set up these ambulance zones. So we went before the ambulance board, made our case. They twisted DeKalb County's arm and they got a little bit better, but fundamentally at the end of the day, we didn't get what we asked for, and we still don't have the ambulance service we think we are paying for and should have. So, you know, there's, you know, state, county, city government, you know, separation of powers, interplay, all happening. You know, it's a big, you know, I guess the point to all of that is that government is messy. There are a lot of moving parts, and at the end of the day, you don't always get what you want. So, yeah, you know, let's see, beyond that, you know, I want to comment on the hereditary aspects of government. I'm running for re-election. I would never expect my son to run for re-election in his spot. I think we repudiated government by heredity, but there's a lot of people that seem to want us to return to it. And I just leave that for you to consider when various scions of big politicians run for office. of either party, Republican or Democrat. And that's another thing to bring up. City Council in Dunwoody is a nonpartisan race. It was set up so that there's not a Republican primary and a Republican candidate and a Democrat primary and a Democrat candidate. The idea was to try to separate local government from all the partisan issues that happen at the state and federal level, and let's just focus on local issues. So it is a nonpartisan race in Dunwoody, and I'm, like I said, up for re-election on November 2nd. So we'll see how it goes. But anyway, that's that's my quick take on you've got your big judiciary, executive, legislature separation of powers, but you've also got this federal separation of powers from the federal to the state, county, and local, and even multiple entities at the local level, as you see here, where we've got the county and the city providing various services in an interlocking way at the local level. Key point about my position is that I get further commentary on the city manager form of government. I'm policy. I can't go tell the director of parks to go put a bench over there. I can ask that happen, and the city manager can either, if he thinks it's reasonable, have the guy do it, have the director of parks do it. If he doesn't, he can tell me to go take a hike. And similarly, I can't influence the judges, on the judicial side of things. We have municipal court. I'll make this room the same offer I make just about everybody. Just so you sort of see where I'm coming from. That's a stack of my cards. That's got my phone number on it. If you manage to get a ticket in Dunwoody, and I hope you don't, we don't want you speeding, but if you manage to get a ticket in Dunwoody, don't call me up. I will meet you at City Hall, and I will carry you inside and show you where the transaction window is so you can pay your fine. And afterwards, I'll take you out for coffee or lunch, or if you're of age, maybe we'll go to Moondog and have a beer.
All right, thank you so much. All right, any questions?
How does the U.S. Constitution protect the use of powers?
Well, there's a couple of ways. One, you can impeach people, and remove them from office. Two, you get a shot at them every election cycle, in the legislature and the executive. You don't get a shot at, you can't not vote in the judges because federal judges are lifetime appointments. But those are your two primary ways: is you vote them out in the next election cycle, or you impeach them if they've really undergone true criminal behavior.
Oh, so another question?
What advice do you recommend for us to how to get involved in our local governments?
Oh gosh, there's lots of ways. Just trying to think where to start. We have, we sponsor things like stream cleanup events once a year. That's a great way. We have a sort of a volunteer operation, that coordinates volunteers for various things. Like, for instance, Dunwoody has the biggest 4th of July parade in the state. We have a whole bunch of folks that volunteer every 4th to be route marshals. So, we don't have enough police to put a policeman at every intersection. We're closing off a big chunk of Mount Vernon. So we have folks that volunteer to be route marshals for the parade. Heck, go attend the Citizen Police Academy and better understand how your police work. Those guys have a really tough job, and I think our PD manages to be both very effective and very respectful of everybody in our community.
It's going to city council members, I'm sorry, city council meetings. Is that something that?
You're welcome to come, or you can, watch it on, we do put out video. If you're having trouble sleeping early on every other Monday night, yeah, that you could watch city council meetings. No, I'm just joking, but it's fairly dry stuff for most folks. We have partnerships with a whole bunch of cool organizations with our parks. So we don't run all the programming in our parks. We have partners that really do most of the programming. So places like the Dunwoody Nature Center and the Sproul Gallery for the Arts, they're all the time looking for volunteers for various things. In fact, I think there's a cleanup Saturday at the Dunwoody Nature Center, which is on Roberts, just above the fire station, on Saturday. So there's lots of volunteer opportunities like that to get involved. Well, you email your council members.
Oh,
You talk to your council members. Again, I don't see your Facebook posts. That's semi-toxic a lot of the time, I fear. I talk to people and, find out what they want in government. And before every council meeting, there is a public comment time, so you can go before you can go before city council. You get 3 minutes to state your piece. We can't respond to you. There are legal reasons for that. If you want a two-way conversation, you need to have a chat with a council member outside of a council meeting. But if you want the whole council to hear it, that's a way to communicate with the council. Yes, sir.
What motivated you to run for the position that you're in? Out of the goals or achievements that you have accomplished so far, what is the one that you've been proud of?
Oh, wow. The second one's tough. There's a lot of things to be proud of, I think, because we've done a lot of good things in 8 years. I ran because we had just been a city for 3 or 4 years, and I wasn't usually unhappy, but there were some course corrections I thought that needed to be made. I thought we were getting involved in some projects that were very inappropriate for that stage in our city's development. I didn't think we were doing enough of the nutsy, boltsy, blocking and tackling, boring stuff of local government. I'm an engineer. I like boring infrastructure. We weren't getting enough paving done. I mean, literally the roads in the city, if you got out and really looked at it back in the neighborhood, they were falling apart. And we were doing too much frou-frou stuff that I thought was maybe being done for people's resumes and not, for the best of the people of the city of Dunwoody. And the people agreed with me. And that's pretty much how I won my first election. And then as far as accomplishments, oh man, well, just, taking the paving cycle down 4 years from 24 years to 20 years was an accomplishment. I'd like it to be a little lower, but I'm okay with where it's at. Like I said, I just needed a little course correction. I'm very proud of what we've done with the parks. I mean, besides Brook Run, Cornershell is a whole new park since I've been on board. We've completely rebuilt a couple of smaller parks like Wynwood Hollow across from the reservoir. My counterpart, Tom Lambert, we just bought a defunct neighborhood swim and tennis and converted that into a new park and are working on improving that. We've put in a pavilion and redone the tennis courts, and the next phase is going to be bathrooms and some bridges to get to some trails. So, the parks program is wonderful. We've also negotiated a very complicated land swap deal with the school system that enabled them to build a new Austin Elementary over on Roberts Drive. But it also gave us a chunk of land over here next to the middle school to build those state-of-the-art baseball fields. Those are two of the best baseball fields in Metro Atlanta. And then we got, as a bonus, we also got the old Austin property land on Roberts. So, that's our next 3 big park projects. Our Perimeter Center East, that should go under construction next year. And I've been pushing that for a long time. When DeKalb County let all the apartments get built in Perimeter Center, they didn't make anybody put in playgrounds as part of these huge apartment blocks, which was criminal if you ask me. Because, you know, you got kids playing in the edges of the parking lots. It's terrible. And then DeKalb County never bought any parkland and built any parks. So we finally managed to buy some land. It's really expensive in Perimeter Center, but we're going to have a nice little park with a good playground and a splash pad for all those kids over there. And then the next two after that are the old Austin property, and we just bought 9 acres on Vermac for another future park. And, you know, we are landlocked. We can't annex adjacent land. There's none to annex. It's all municipalized on all our borders. And, you know, land is just, you know, Dunwoody's an expensive suburb. Land is stupid expensive. And, you know, you got to pay through the nose for it. But if you want to have some more parkland, and we do, you have to pay for it. And we just acquired about a 9.5 acre additional piece of parkland on Vermac Drive. So I guess the parks program and improvements in infrastructure are kind of two of my big, you know, it all gets down to the 4 Ps of local government. When you get into talking about local government, there's 4 Ps. Planning and zoning, I kind of put off by itself. It's very important, but it's not a very expensive thing. It kind of does its own thing. So, you know, planning and zoning is not a big, you know, not a big cost item. And then the priority stack on the costly stuff for me is public safety, public works, and then parks. You know, I like the fun stuff. I want to build more of the fun stuff. But, you know, if you got to do the fun stuff last after you do the basics. Anybody else?
Who selects the city limits and let's say a neighborhood that it doesn't belong to?
So if there were areas of land that were part of unincorporated DeKalb County adjacent to the city, there is a process by which you can annex them, and it involves, you know, getting people to buy in and getting the legislature to vote for it. We have no land like that. All the adjacent property is fully municipalized. Everything is part of either Sandy Springs, Chamblee, Peachtree Corners, Sandy Springs, Brookhaven. All our borders are fully municipalized. So, and there's no way, you know, I say there's no easy way to leave City A to join City B in the Georgia schema. It just doesn't happen. Although, you know, Buckhead's trying to, you know, I don't know how much you follow the Atlanta papers, and, you know, Buckhead wants to become their own city, and that's a similar kind of thing. That, you know, they tried to do that down in Eagles Landing and split off. I forget what, is it Fairburn? They were trying to split off from, I want to say Fairburn. I may have it wrong. No, it wasn't the city of South Fulton. It was something else. I want to say Fairburn. I may have that wrong, but they wanted to create a city of Eagles Landing from Stockbridge. It was Stockbridge and Eagles Landing. You know, they wanted to calve off from Stockbridge and become their own city of Eagles Landing, and the legislature said, "Nah, we're not going there." Is basically how that, you know, that's my summary of how that went down. So, you know, generally, if you're part of a city, you're there for the long haul. You know, there's very few places where cities cross county lines in Georgia. City of Atlanta is one of them. Most of the city of Atlanta is in Fulton County, but there's chunks of it here and there that are in DeKalb. You know, you'll hear reference to Atlanta in DeKalb. And Emory fits the bill there. You know, they lobbied to become part of the city of Atlanta.
Got an online question.
Yes, sir.
What is the most interesting municipal concerns that you've witnessed as a council?
Oh, gosh, most interesting. Think about that for a minute. I mean, frustrating and maddening would probably be the ambulance service thing. You know, I have taken to describing the state ambulance system as Byzantine and opaque. And these are not adjectives I like using to describe governmental activities. I'm all for transparency and straightforwardness, okay? But interesting. You know, sort of one of the more fun things has been interacting with, you know, and better understanding, you know, some of the entities we interact with. That gets into another kind of aspect of local government that I didn't talk about, but Georgia has these things called community improvement districts. And this is where business entities in a region get together and determine that they're going to tax themselves to improve that area. And the reason Perimeter Center looks so much nicer than everywhere else is all those offices and the mall and all the commercial businesses minus the apartments, they tax themselves over and above their normal property tax to make all those improvements. So they're basically you know, and their board is the landowners. There's no elections. They're, you know, and honestly, I don't know the details of how they select the board members who, you know, who run the CID. They have an executive director. She happens to live in Dunwoody. Her name is Ann Hanlon. Great woman. Did wonderful things in her previous role up in North Fulton CID. If you ever drive up 400 and you notice a really nice bridge over 400 that's not at an exit next to North Point, Ann got that built. And you know, they do a great job in Perimeter Center and working with them, you know, on projects, you know, like they've funded a lot of neat stuff that we've gotten built. Like we built a multi-purpose trail bridge over the Nancy Creek tributary that they half funded, we funded. And it, you know, it's just fun, you know, seeing stuff like that get built and come to fruition and, you know, and working, you know, as a team with folks like that.
Because I've got one. Maybe because I am a little more familiar. Of course, we know about the federal government, we know about state government. As your experience as a city councilman, which relationship do you, I guess, like the most? Working with the state or working with the federal government?
Honestly, we really don't have a huge amount of interaction with either, and that's as it should be. We stick to our knitting. We've got our lanes, they've got theirs, and really we don't cross into their world very much at all. You know, except when there are these issues with things like the ambulance system, you know, then, you know, we're calling up our state rep, you know, our state senator and state rep and saying, hey, what can you do to fix this? You know, is there legislation we can propose at the state level to maybe open this thing up a little more so that we can run our own ambulance system? So that, you know, it's only when we really need something from the, you know, that level that we get involved. Most of the time, you know, we're just doing our thing and they're doing theirs, and you know, we don't interact all that much. It's surprising, really. You know, it's like, it's also the same thing with Sandy Springs. You know, we have a big border with Sandy Springs. Love those guys. We don't interact with them much.
That was going to be my next question. Which city do you like to work with the most?
We really, you know, we look at what each other is doing and try to, you know, take good ideas. But, you know, like for instance, the boundary between Dunwoody and Sandy Springs, a good chunk of it runs right down the middle of Dunwoody Club. The center line is the county and city border. So what do you do when you want to repave that road? Well, the answer is you get both public works departments together. They determine whose contractor, you know, they've got, you know, basically road repaving contracts in place. They look at whoever's contractor is going to do it for the best price. That one does it, and we, you know, and then, you know, like if they do it, we pay them half the cost. So that's kind of how we work together. There've been some other things, like for instance, the border between DeKalb County, Dunwoody, and Gwinnett County, Peachtree Corners, as you go down Winters Chapel, is really weird. I mean, when you go from Peachtree Industrial over to Spalding on Winters Chapel, you change cities and counties, and towards the further north, you get into Fulton and Sandy Springs, but you go through a boundary about 6 or 7 times. And, you know, it just does that number. Well, we're trying to build some multi-purpose trail down that road, but we get into places where, okay, we can't build there because that's in Gwinnett County. We can't build outside of our footprint. There's legal issues that prevent us from doing things like that. So, I call up Lori Thomas, who I know she's in my Rotary Club. She's a longtime council member over there, and Phil Sade, who's that district. We call them up and say, hey, we're working on this project, can you guys fund some multi-purpose trail to connect from here to there so we can, and they're great to work with on stuff like that.
That's why you probably have some trails that are connected and some that are done or finished.
Well, it's all just, again, Rome was not built in a day, and we've been a city for 12 years.
Yeah,
So we're chipping away at stuff, but it all takes time. And
safety gets pushed
Yeah,
over the
there's an
other.
online where does it exist where some of the powers of government must interact with each other?
well, I mean, sure. Like, for instance, we had in our city charter a requirement that there be a charter review at time X. And so at time X, Lynn appointed, there were members appointed by various entities. The mayor got an appointment, all of the delegation, the Georgia House delegation, or Georgia House and Senate delegation each got to appoint a member. So now that would be Mike Walensky and Sally Harrell and gosh, I should know the Brookhaven guy's name, and I'm drawing a blank on it. He has no constituents in Dunwoody. He has the bridge trolls under 285 is it. Seriously, he's got a strip of land under 285 that nobody lives in. It's just because of a vagary of boundaries. But he got to appoint a member. So at the end of this charter review that these folks did, their recommendations go to the legislature so that, for those changes to be enacted into the city charter, it's got to go through the Gold Dome process. So that's an example of where we interact with them and have to.
You mentioned that you believe in this philosophy called
Subsidiarity.
yes, subsidiarity. Like how the local government should focus more on their own focus and not.
Well, the idea is that anything government does should be done at the lowest level of government possible. If the lowest appropriate level is your HOA, because you live in an HOA neighborhood, great. Don't get the city involved. If the city has to do it, great. Don't get the county or the state involved. If the state can do it, why should the Fed gov be involved? You want to have local control, so you've got people who understand the local issues that are closest to the problem.
It's see from the big government, having education with all the systems, issues are affecting their issues. Instead of all the government scrambling, because I know for some areas in Fulton, they don't have any money for their schools. Their local governments are more connected to the higher levels who does have the money, better for the residents. So,
I don't know, they've got as much money for schools as anybody else in Fulton County.
I thought they got their license.
Yeah, that's a different issue. So I think that was that Clayton County? Was that when the Clayton County school system? Yeah, I don't think that was a money issue. I think that was a competency issue, to be quite honest. I mean, and DeKalb came close, not that long ago, like 7 or 8 years ago. DeKalb came close to losing certification. Because I know, man who was one of my counterparts for a time and is running, long story, he was a council member, he's running to be a council member again. He ran for mayor 2 years ago and was unsuccessful. But Terry Knoll was, one of his suggestions to DeKalb County was that they got an alternate certification so that if they failed the certification that they had, if they failed to regain the certification they had held, they at least had a backup certification. Ultimately, they had both for a while, I think. But again, DeKalb County's not short on money. What they're short on is competency.
That's part of the issue with many of these city versus county governments, right? That the city said we can make decisions better
Right.
because we know what our city needs. We know what our, 10 square miles, 50 square miles.
You know, and to speak to that on schools, again, I don't have much control on schools, but I watched the process and it's, it's been a disaster. Local schools in Dunwoody are no longer a decadal problem. They are a multi-generational problem, okay? And here's where I'm coming from on that. I have constituents who went to school in trailers in DeKalb County schools in Dunwoody who now have kids who are attending schools in trailers in DeKalb County schools. And it's unconscionable that the school system was unable to address that over that long of a period of time. And, so you've got all these super overcrowded schools in Dunwoody, but there's schools in other parts of the county, big ones like high schools that are under 50% occupancy. So there's a huge failure in the building program, in planning, in political will to shut down schools, redistrict, do what it takes to get kids into proper, physical plant for their education. So that's, just my 2 cents. It's not an issue of, they've had the money. They've just misused it over many, many years. What's that? Say again?
Essentially, like, let's consider you're a person, like you're a competent entity, and you got a lesser entity that's not as competent. Should you have the power to like take over the entity, or to like?
Yeah, that's an interesting angle. The former school board member longtime school board member out here, Nancy Jester, she was pretty familiar with the Texas system. In Texas, school systems aren't tied to a geography. In Georgia, they tend to be tied to a geography. It's mostly counties. There's a few legacy city school systems like Decatur, like City of Atlanta, et cetera. But you can't create more of them. In Texas, they create and merge and calve off school districts, routinely. And if you have a failing school district, yeah, they'll collapse it and start over. But Georgia doesn't operate like that. So there's I guess the point is there's some justification in doing that, in operating that way, but it's not how that works in Georgia. And I don't think it should work that way with cities. Well, I want to thank you all for having me. I hope this wasn't too boring.
Thank you so much. And one of the questions was, how can we get involved? One way, I just want to direct you to the voter engagement site on the GSU, a way that really has a lot of really great information about how to register to vote. If you're already registered, how to check who's on the ballot, how to get an absentee ballot, you need an ID. All right, so everything that you need pretty on the site. So go to vote.gsu.edu. And you also have a schedule of the rest of the programs for Constitution Week. So please make sure that you take a look at that. Please don't forget to RSVP. And we've got quite a few programs still left in the week. All right, let's get a final round of applause. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. Make sure that you have signed the sign-in sheet, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Throw me that USB stick.